The palace gates were still. The kind of still that only comes just before something breaks. It was 4:47 in the morning. The sky hadn't decided yet if it wanted to be night or day. A pale gray light was beginning to press against the edges of the horizon. And standing at his post, completely alone, was a guard named Daniel Holt. Daniel had been standing at that same gate for 11 years. Same boots, same rifle, same uniform, same silence. To most people walking by, he was part of the scenery, like the iron fence, like the stone wall, like something that had always been there and would always be there. Nobody ever asked his name. He was 42 years old, quiet, thin at the shoulders now. His eyes had a kind of weight to them, not sadness exactly. More like something that had been carried a very long time without anyone offering to help. That morning, he had come to work with a letter folded in his jacket pocket. He hadn't told anyone about the letter. Not his colleague at the shift change, not the senior officer, not a single soul. But the letter had been there for 3 days now. He had read it so many times, the fold lines were beginning to tear. He knew every word without opening it. His wife was sick. Not a cold, not something small. The kind of sick that changes everything. The doctors had been honest with her. And then she had been honest with him. And now he was standing at the palace gate at 4:47 in the morning, holding his rifle straight and his face still, while his entire world was collapsing quietly inside his chest. He didn't cry. He had learned long ago that guards don't cry at their post. So he stood, and the morning came slowly around him. If this kind of story moves you, the kind that reminds you what it means to be human, you're in the right place. Subscribe now and hit the bell. Stories like this are what this channel is built for. At 6:15, the first cars began to move inside the palace grounds. Staff, security rotations. The quiet machinery of a royal morning beginning to turn. Daniel watched it all with the same expression he always wore, still unreadable. And then something happened that had never happened in 11 years. A car stopped near his post, not the usual slow roll. It actually stopped. Right there, just inside the inner gate. The window came down. Daniel's posture went rigid. Protocol, eyes forward. Don't engage unless spoken to. Then a voice came out of that car. Calm, unhurried. Not the kind of voice that expected to be ignored. How long have you been on shift? Daniel blinked once. He turned his head just slightly and looked. It was Prince William. No entourage. No assistant at his elbow. Just him in the front seat, window down. Looking at Daniel the way very few people ever had, like he was actually seeing him. Daniel cleared his throat. Since midnight, sir. The prince nodded slowly. That's a long night. It was a simple thing to say. The kind of thing anyone might say. But something about the way he said it, without rushing, without looking at his phone, without being anywhere else, made it land differently. Daniel felt something shift in his chest. He didn't know it yet. But this was the moment everything was about to change. Not just for him, for the palace, for a decision that would ripple through the lives of dozens of people in ways no one could have predicted. It started with 4 words. How long have you been? And a guard who had spent 11 years hoping someone would finally notice him. Asterisk, asterisk. The car didn't move. That was the strange part. In 11 years, Daniel had never seen a royal vehicle linger. They came and went like the tides, smooth, scheduled, purposeful. There was no room in that world for pausing at a guard post just to talk. But the window stayed down. Prince William was looking at him. The way someone looks when they've asked a question and actually want the answer. Daniel stood a little straighter. It's not so bad, sir. The quiet helps. It wasn't entirely true. But it was the kind of answer a man gives when he's not sure he's allowed to give a real one. The prince studied him for a moment. There was something in his expression, not pity, not casual politeness, something more like recognition, like he had seen that look before, that carefully held stillness. That face that says, "I'm fine," while the hands grip just a little too tight. "You've been here a long time," William said. It wasn't a question. 11 years, sir. A pause. That kind of loyalty doesn't go unnoticed. Daniel nodded. The correct response. The professional response. But his jaw tightened slightly, the way a jaw does when a man is keeping something inside. By sheer force of will, he thought of the letter. He thought of his wife. Margaret, in the hospital bed 3 days ago, holding his hand and telling him it was going to be okay, when they both knew she was the one. Who needed to hear that? He thought of the bills, already stacking on the kitchen table. He thought of how many more midnight shifts he would need to work just to cover what the insurance wouldn't. None of this showed on his face. He was a guard. He had been trained to hold the line, but something, maybe the early morning light, maybe the exhaustion behind his eyes, maybe 11 years of silence finally pressing too hard against the inside of his ribs, made one small thing slipped at his hand. It moved to his jacket pocket. Just for a second. Just a touch, like checking the letter was still there. It was an unconscious thing, a private thing, and he realized immediately he'd done it. He straightened, reset, eyes forward. But Prince William had seen it. "What's in your pocket?" he asked. Gently, the way you ask something when you don't want the other person to feel cornered. Daniel hesitated. A long beat of silence passed between them. "Nothing, sir. Apologies." William looked at him quietly. Then he did something unexpected. He turned off the car engine. He opened the door and stepped out. Now he was standing beside the vehicle. On Daniel's side of the world, hands in his jacket pockets, the morning air cool around them both. He wasn't in a hurry. He wasn't performing. He was just there. "It's early," William said. "No cameras. No one watching. You can be honest with me." Daniel felt the words land somewhere deep. He looked straight ahead for another moment. Then, slowly, he exhaled. "My wife is ill, sir," he said. "Seriously ill. I found out 3 days ago." He didn't say more than that. He didn't know how to, or if he was even allowed to, but the prince didn't look uncomfortable. He didn't offer a quick sorry and get back in the car. He just nodded once, slowly, with the kind of weight that meant, "I heard you." "What's her name?" William asked. "Margaret, sir." The prince said the name quietly back, like he was making sure to remember it. "Margaret." And then he asked the question that Daniel hadn't expected from anyone, least of all from here. Least of all at 6:15 in the morning outside a palace gate. "What do you need?" Daniel opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. He had not been asked that question in a very long time. He didn't know how to answer it, and somewhere behind the carefully held stillness, something began very quietly to crack. Asterisk. Asterisk, the question hung in the air between them. What do you need? For words, simple, but for Daniel Holt, they were the most dangerous words he had heard in years. Because the moment someone asks what you need, really asks, and means it, the wall you've spent so long building has to decide whether to hold or give way. His wall gave way. Not all at once, not dramatically. Just in the way exhausted things do when finally given permission to rest. "I don't know where to start." "Sir," Daniel said. His voice was steady, barely, but his eyes, those quiet, heavy eyes, told a different story. Prince William didn't rush him. He leaned slightly against the car, arms crossed loosely, the way a person stands when they're telling you with their body that they're not going anywhere. So, Daniel talked. He talked about Margaret. about how she'd been hiding her symptoms for months because she didn't want to worry him, about how he'd found out the truth not from her but from a phone call with a doctor, a call she hadn't known he was on, about sitting in the hospital car park for 40 minutes afterward, unable to start the engine, unable to move. He talked about the cost, the specialist fees, the treatment plan the NHS could partially cover, but not fully, the number on the estimate sheet that had made his vision blur when he'd read it. He talked about his son, James, 16 years old, a good boy, a quiet boy who had started making his own breakfast every morning without being asked, because somehow he understood that his parents were carrying something heavy, and he wanted to help in the only way he knew how. William listened to all of it. Every word, he asked small questions. Soft ones. Not the kind that steer a conversation, but the kind that keep a door open. How old is Margaret? What does James want to do after school? How long have you two been together? Daniel answered each one. And somewhere in the answering, his shoulders dropped half an inch. The grip loosened. 20-2 years, he said. He and Margaret, they'd met when he was still training, when she'd laughed at him for polishing his boots at a dinner party because old habits die hard. She had a laugh that made strangers smile. That was the thing about Margaret. She never walked into a room. She arrived in it. William smiled at that. A real one. Then he was quiet for a moment, thoughtful. You've given 11 years to this place, he said. Midnight shifts, holidays, the invisible work that most people never see. He paused. That matters. You matter. And Margaret matters. Daniel nodded. His throat was tight. I'd like to help, William said. If you'll let me. Daniel looked at him. Sir, I can't accept. I'm not offering charity, William said, cutting him off gently. I'm offering a conversation with the right people to see what support exists that you may not know about. There are channels, quiet ones, for staff and their families. Things I'm not sure you've ever been told about. Daniel blinked. I didn't know. Most people don't. That's something I'd like to change. The morning had fully arrived now. The sky was pale gold. Somewhere inside the palace grounds, the day's routines were beginning in earnest. William straightened. He reached into his own jacket and took out a small card, plain handwritten on the back, a name and a number. Call that person today, he said. Tell them I ask you to call. They will help you find what Margaret needs. Daniel took the card carefully, like it was something fragile. Why? He asked. It came out before he could stop it. Not disrespectful. Just honest. Why me? William looked at him, steady, direct, without ceremony. Because you were standing here, he said. And I looked. He got back into the car. The engine turned over. The window went up. And Daniel stood alone at his post again, the card warm in his hand, the morning light falling soft across the palace stones. He looked down at the name on the card. He didn't know it yet, but that name was about to open a door that would change not just his life, but the lives of every unseen person working within those walls. Asterisk, asterisk. The name on the card was Eleanor Voss. Daniel had never heard of her. He turned the card over a dozen times that afternoon, sitting in the small break room behind the guardhouse, his cold tea forgotten beside him. He almost didn't call. That part is important, because there's a kind of pride that lives in men like Daniel. Not arrogance, but something quieter. A belief that asking for help is the same as admitting defeat. 11 years of standing straight, of holding the line, of never letting anything show that doesn't disappear. Just because someone was kind to you on a Tuesday morning. He sat with the card for 3 hours. Then he thought about James. Making his own breakfast, he made the call. Eleanor Voss answered on the second ring. Her voice was warm and businesslike, at the same time the voice of someone who knew how to hold two things at once. He told her his name. He told her Prince William had asked him to call. There was a brief pause. Then, "I've been expecting to hear from you." He hadn't expected that, she explained, carefully and without fuss, that there was a welfare foundation, quietly run, largely unknown to most palace staff, that had been established years ago, specifically for long-serving employees and their families facing medical or financial hardship. It wasn't publicized. It wasn't offered at orientation. It was the kind of thing you only found out about if someone who knew told you. Most people never found out. Daniel's hands were trembling slightly as he wrote down the details. He pressed the pen hard so the words would stay. Within 48 hours, Eleanor had connected him with a senior medical liaison, a financial support advisor, and most importantly, a specialist consultant who had been working with Margaret's condition for over a decade. A name Daniel had seen in his own desperate late-night research, always just out of reach behind long waiting lists and private fees he couldn't cover. That name was now returning his calls. He came home that evening, Kay, and sat across from Margaret at the kitchen table. She had tried to make dinner just soup, because that was what she could manage, and she looked thin and tired and still. Somehow, the most beautiful person he had ever seen. He told her everything. She listened without interrupting. When he finished, her eyes were full, but she didn't let the tears fall. She reached across the table and covered his hand with hers. "You talked to someone," she said. "I did." "You actually asked for help." He almost laughed. "I know. Don't make it strange." She squeezed his hand. "I'm proud of you." James walked in from upstairs at that moment in his school tracksuit, about to ask what was for dinner. He looked at his parents sitting across from each other, something different in the air of the room, and stopped. "Is everything okay?" he asked. Daniel looked at his son, 16 years old, old enough to understand that the world is complicated, young enough to still believe, somewhere underneath it all, that things can get better. "It's getting better," Daniel told him. James nodded slowly. He went to the cabinet, got 3 bowls, set the table without being asked. But what happened next? The part that went beyond one family, beyond one midnight conversation at a palace gate, was something none of them saw coming, because Eleanor Voss had made note of something in her conversation with Daniel. Something that troubled her. He hadn't known the foundation existed. After 11 years of service, he had no idea help was available. She brought this directly to the one person she knew would do something about it, and 3 days later, Prince William was sitting in a meeting that had not been on anyone's original schedule, asking a room full of senior staff a very uncomfortable question. How many others don't know? The room went quiet, and in that silence was the beginning of something much larger than one guard and one conversation, the meeting room was the kind of place where uncomfortable things are smoothed over quickly. Senior advisors, heads of department, people who had spent careers learning how to manage difficult conversations without letting them become difficult decisions. Prince William sat at the head of the table. He had not come in with a speech. He had come in with one question, the one he'd been carrying since Eleanor Voss had called him the previous afternoon. He asked it plainly. No preamble. How many members of staff don't know that welfare support exists for them? The room shifted. There was the usual response, reassurances. The foundation was accessible, they said. There were internal communication channels. Staff were informed during OMBOA&G. William waited until they finished. Then he said, quietly, a man with 11 years of service had no idea it existed. He found out because I happened to stop at the gate one morning. Silence. That's not a system, he said. That's luck. Hey, no one argued. Because no one could dot, an audit was requested. Not a formal, sweeping review with committees and months of delay, but a direct, practical survey. Reach out to long-serving staff across departments. Ask them simply, do you know what support is available to you and your family? The results came back in 2 weeks. They were sobering. Of the staff surveyed, who had been employed for over 5 years, fewer than 1 in 3 knew the Welfare Foundation existed. Among those in non-administrative roles, guards, groundskeepers, kitchen staff, maintenance workers, the number dropped lower still. These were people who had given years of their lives. People who came in before dawn and left after dark. People who held umbrellas in the rain at public events so that someone else wouldn't get wet. People who polished floors, no one. Photographed and fixed gates, no one thanked them. For they had been carrying their private struggles in the same silence. Daniel had carried his dot because no one had told. Them, they didn't have to. William took the findings personally. That word personally is important here because it would have been very easy for the results to become a memo. A restructuring proposal. Something filed away and revisited in 6 months. Instead, he pushed for something immediate. A dedicated staff welfare coordinator was appointed, a real one, with visibility and authority, not just a name on an org chart. A simple plain language guide was written and physically distributed to every member of staff, regardless of their role or rank. It listed every support available to them: medical, financial, mental health, housing assistance, family bereavement care. 1 page, clear English. No bureaucratic language in the margin of the final draft before it went to print. Someone had added a handwritten note that made its way to Eleanor Voss, who kept it framed on her office wall for years. Afterward it read, "No one who serves here should carry something alone that they don't have to." No name. But she knew who had written it. Daniel didn't know any of this was happening. He was on a modified schedule. Now shorter shifts while Margaret began her treatment. The specialist had moved quickly. The treatment plan was aggressive but hopeful. She was tired most days. Some days were very hard, but she was fighting. And so was he. He came home one Thursday afternoon to find a card on the kitchen table. James had brought in the post and left it there before going to football training. It was a plain envelope. Palace letterhead on the back. No return name. Inside was a single handwritten line. "Please give our best to Margaret. You are both in our thoughts." Daniel sat down at the kitchen table. He read it twice, then he folded it carefully and put it in his jacket pocket, right beside where the other letter had been. But this time, when his hand touched the pocket, there was no dread. No weight. Just something he hadn't felt in a very long time. Something that felt quietly, carefully, like being seen. Margaret finished her final treatment on a Thursday in late autumn. The leaves were down. The sky was that flat, pale color that comes before the first real cold of the year. She walked out of the hospital with Daniel on one side and James on the other. And she stopped on the front steps and tilted her face upward, eyes closed, just feeling the air. She didn't say anything for a long moment. Then she said, "I want soup." James laughed loud. Surprised, the laugh of a 16-year-old who had been holding his breath for months without knowing it. Daniel reached over and took her hand. They went home. The welfare guide reached every member of Palace staff before the winter holiday break. Most people read it quietly, tucked it somewhere, filed it mentally in the category of things that were good to know. A few people made calls that same week, carefully, privately. The way people reach out when they're not sure if they're allowed to need something. Those calls were answered. One groundskeeper, 40 years in service, finally got help with a housing situation he'd been managing alone for 3 years. A kitchen assistant who had been quietly struggling with grief after losing her mother accessed counseling support she hadn't known was available. A maintenance worker whose teenage daughter had been dealing with a serious health condition found out the foundation could help cover costs his salary. A loan could not. None of these stories made the news. None of them were meant to. That's not what they were about. They were about the ordinary weight that ordinary people carry. Quietly for years, and how much lighter it becomes when someone finally looks at them and says, "You don't have to do this alone." Daniel returned to full shifts in the spring. He was at his post at the inner gate on a Tuesday morning, 6:20 a.m. Same pale gold light he'd been standing in for 12 years now when a car slowed beside him. The window came down. He straightened. Protocol, back to full shifts. Prince William asked. Daniel looked at him. Something in his chest was different now. The heaviness was still there. Life doesn't disappear its weight entirely, but it was the manageable kind. The kind you carry knowing someone else knows you're carrying it. "Yes, sir," Daniel said. "As of Monday. And Margaret?" "She's well, sir." "The doctors are pleased." William nodded. A simple nod. The kind that means more than it shows. "Glad to hear it." The window began to go up. Then it stopped. "I heard they've started giving out the new welfare guides," Daniel said. He hadn't planned to say it. But it came out before the moment could close. William looked at him. "Apparently a lot of people didn't know," Daniel said. "About the support. About all of it." "No," William said. "They didn't." A pause. "They do now," Daniel said. The prince held his gaze for a moment. And something passed between them, not grand, not ceremonial, not the kind of thing that gets recorded anywhere. Just two people standing on either side of a gate acknowledging something that had quietly mattered. "They do now," William said. The window went up. The car moved on. Daniel turned back to face the morning. The same post, the same gates, the same iron fence and stone wall and pale. Sky pressing through the trees. But something about the air felt different. He thought about all the people who'd stood here before him, in silence, carrying things no one knew about. He thought about the ones standing right now in other posts, in other corridors, in early morning kitchens and windswept courtyards all across the grounds. And he thought, someone looked. And because someone looked, more people know they can ask. That's all it took. One car stopping, one window coming down, one man finally willing to say, "My wife is sick, and I don't know what to do," and one person who heard him. The world doesn't change all at once. It changes in small moments that nobody photographs, in conversations at 6 a.m. that nobody else hears, in a guard with a letter in his pocket, deciding just barely to answer honestly when someone asks how long he's been standing there. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Because somewhere, right now, someone is standing at their own gate, carrying something heavy, waiting for someone to look, be the person who looks.